Let me tell you something about authentication and authorization with Scrivito. For authorization purposes, Scrivito offers permissions. By means of an API, the developer can define which editor is allowed to change or publish which part of a website. As an example, I took one of our Infopog websites. It already runs with Scrivito, but there are no users or editors. Bit by bit, I will show you how to implement a differentiated user and permission system in this app. The Scrivito permission system is based on 3 components. 1. User management, or the question, where do users come from? 2. Permissions for working copies, or who is allowed to use or publish which working copy. 3. Who is permitted to change which content, or technically speaking, who may change the CMS objects. You can see that we are allowed to change any content, even though we are not logged in yet. This is the default after integrating Scrivito into the app, so you can instantly start developing instead of having to focus on login, authentication, permissions and all that stuff. In this way, you can start hacking content that you can show. At the moment, we are in the development environment. If you deploy and run the app in production, Scrivito does a safety shutdown. You can still see the website, but the editing bar will disappear. Instead, you would see a warning box telling you that you need some kind of login. Otherwise, anyone visiting your website would be able to modify its content. To get that login mechanism, we need to modify a callback in the configuration. This is the default initializer of Scrivito, which is generated automatically. It already includes different configurations, but got nothing about permissions. I will show you a very simple solution that lets you edit again in your production environment. Just copy this to the editing auth callback of the configuration. This callback is called on every request. It fetches the rack environment, which is represented by env. Based on this rack environment, the current user is determined. So mainly this is about authentication. What I do here is just return the Scrivito system user. The callback needs to return a user object, and the system user is such a user object built into Scrivito. It's like a Linux root user with all permissions. This is a dangerous configuration because it tells the app that everyone who interacts with it is root user and thus permitted to do anything. This should only be used if you run your app locally or if it's protected by some kind of real authentication. Of course, this is not what you want. The users should at least be forced to log in before they can make any changes to the website. Therefore, we need to modify our callback a little. Instead of env, I use the session now. This is my normal Rails session that I get from my Rails environment. My app already has a login mechanism that writes a user ID into the session after logging in. This is the standard login mechanism as you know it from Rails. Everything I do here still returns the system user, but now only if a user ID has been written to the session. That is if I'm logged in. I made changes to the initializer, so I need to restart my Rails app. Now you see that my Scrivito bar disappeared. So I'm not able to edit anymore. This is because I'm not yet logged in. I log in as Alice now, and there is my Scrivito editing bar again. So by means of my callback, I link my login that I already had to Scrivito. This has the effect that I may only edit when I'm logged in. This is the first basic level of security for the app, which should be sufficient for a small organization with only 2 editors who trust each other. In a larger organization, you'd rather differentiate between individual users, giving them different working copies and permissions. To achieve this, we need to further extend the callback. So the differentiation between users will be the topic of our next tutorial. Be sure to watch it and have a nice day.